So, Jeff, you want to welcome everybody here?
Sure. So yeah, I guess the simple thing is to welcome all of y'all and coming to this breakout here. Really what we want to focus on here is, kind of drive into the role of industry in these career pathways and the matchmaking that needs to go on between the workforce pipeline that we're developing, that's new, different, coming from different sources and geographies than it traditionally comes from. What is it? What's the role of industry in facilitating that? But also, I think, what I tend to get stuck on is how do we make that last mile connection, right? We know there are people out there that are getting trained on the skills that we're looking for across key industries, IT, healthcare, manufacturing, financial services. What should we be doing to ensure that the skills that they're learning do match up with what the industry needs? At what point is, what's the interaction between industry and the training folks? Especially the universities, work-based training versus certificates in the schools. There's a bunch of questions here that when the rubber finally hits the road, what is it that, is incumbent upon us as employers to drive, but then take advantage of the investments that the state and others are making in opening up this pipeline. Mark, is that a fair? I mean, I know I'm kind of biased.
That's a great intro, Jeff.
One angle. But...
Yeah, that's a great intro. Why don't we, Ray, stop sharing the screen for a sec so everybody can see each other, and just and talk about that. What's to just paraphrase Jeff. Kind of what do we need to do to kind of really make those the last mile connections work between kind of people in education and training programs and kind of what employers need? What are your observations? What can we be doing better? Either as businesses, as educators, as government leaders, what have you. Jeff, you want to kind of share you guys have been hard at it trying to make it work. You may want to just kind of share what some of your, kind of positive and experiences and frustrations a little bit.
Sure. And for those of you who haven't met, so I'm running the Infosys region for us up here, and we've got some commitments to bring quite a few IT jobs to Hartford, to Connecticut, to the region, with a focus on the the college graduates and the new entrants in. We've been very active in participating with a lot of our peers, our competitors, in the IT space, in creating enough of a clear demand to justify what we hope is investment from the state. We know that one company like ours would never, on our own, be enough to justify this sort of investment. And I think the response and the willingness of the academics to engage, not just in the curricular side, but in sort of the co-curricular, the extracurricular side, adding certificates that are very industry driven, say, any of the cloud certificates like Google, AWS. We found that those that are training our people and educating the people in Connecticut have been very responsive, and which is great. And I think we've all been through situations where industry and academics don't necessarily see eye to eye on each other's mission. But what we're really, where we kind of struggle a bit is, all right, now we've got a whole bunch of different certified training, paths for people to come in. Some have 2, 3, 4, 5 people. Some have hundreds. Some are much better at the the training than others, and a lot of this is just the newness of things. But that marketplace, that efficient way that my recruiters can get at the talent we're creating, is really where we kind of grind a bit, and we have to go kind of school by school, program by program, and really do that searching. It's getting better, but that's really where we've had some of the challenge.
Okay. I see Senator Hwang is Senator.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for for always doing such a great job with the Workforce Council. I wanted to focus on pathways related to apprenticeships. I've had the opportunity of touring a number of custom manufacturing facilities and meeting the talents of skilled craftsmen, but they're all older. And one of the things that we focused on legislatively is really empowering and really accelerating the apprenticeship initiative. Feedback that we got from industry is they would love to have that help, but they have to go through that pipeline and coordination with the Department of Labor to be able to facilitate those apprenticeship initiatives and some funding and incentive supports. Is there any discussions in regards to how we can incentivize and encourage DOL to move the process along and really empower and encourage apprenticeship training programs in many of our very competitive custom manufacturing? There's a critical crisis in my mind over the horizon. They're all getting significantly older. You don't hear a lot about it from a lot of the initiatives we're talking about with regards to college and some of the other skill sets that we hear so often about: technology, healthcare, software. The apprenticeship skilled trades arena is a critical need, and it's a competitive advantage for many of our small manufacturing companies because they have great talent. We need to teach that talent. So I love to get feedback to see how we can create a more efficient pathway for apprenticeship training.
That is such an important point, Senator. Thank you for kind of raising it, because one of the areas of feedback we've been getting is the training programs and education programs are nice, but they're actually looking for people with actual kind of, experience, in the work setting that apprenticeships would clearly provide. So it's a really important kind of, area to kind of grow. I'm curious if you could just say more about kind of what kind of obstacles you're having right now, or what small manufacturers are having that you've heard about in terms of getting their programs through the pipeline.
Well, I can offer that for us as legislators, Democrat and Republican, and the governor's office understand the importance and the critical need for developing these kind of skilled crafts. But what I've heard from two organizations that I talked about is, one, the ability to have the Department of Labor review their process to approve these apprenticeship initiatives. And I think the other is to really understand many of these organizations, they only have one or two, machinists or master die makers or welders, that they need to be able to plan and allocate the time to train these individuals. We should review the guidelines from the Department of Labor in regards to what is needed to qualify. I think the other part is also to be able to communicate to our high schools and vocational school programs that manufacturers are eagerly looking to initiate these programs. I think it's all about making the connections, and if we can smooth out the process, I think that would be extremely helpful. I know the companies, once you ask them of it and you share with them that we could help try to ease the process, I think they'd be very receptive to it. I think most of them, they're far too busy to be able to take time to contemplate that planning. But unfortunately, when they don't plan enough and an abrupt retirement and the skill sets, a history of skill sets get taken away, and it's not retrained or apprenticed, we're at a loss. And to me, what I've seen with our custom manufacturing and working with Paul Lavoie is the fact that we have some of the best talents that's been developed over the history of this state. We're going to lose them, and we're never, ever going to recapture that. And that is a terrible loss in competitive advantage. So I think legislatively, we can look at creating a process of DOL, helping them expedite the process and communicate to these companies that we're helping that along, and they need to make that commitment. We'll help them with the process, and it won't be such a burden. That's just my thought.
That's really helpful feedback. Thank you, Senator. And also, I'll just point out that one of the hidden points, maybe a little bit, in the WIOA vote that we did today on the governor's reserve is to add an additional resource on apprenticeships at DOL. So maybe that can help a little bit in terms of kind of the, kind of speeding up the kind of process pipeline by having a little bit more resource there in that unit. But we'll definitely kind of, take a look at that. The other thing that, and it doesn't necessarily relate to your point, Senator, but I do know some companies have kind of come up with their own apprenticeship or / internship kind of programs. They may not meet the criteria in the Department of Labor of kind of their definition of apprenticeships, but they're nevertheless kind of, active and generating. Like, for example, I think at an earlier meeting, we've talked about Accenture's, what they call their apprenticeship program in Hartford that's happening at Capital Community College. And as of this month, there are currently 30 students in this 1 year, 30 people in this 1 year, 12-month apprenticeship program of theirs. And they're looking to continue to scale it every month. They're adding new, people to it. And it's pretty much a kind of 90% likelihood of getting hired by them or one of their clients kind of, at the end of that. So we're quite excited about that as kind of another example of what can be done in providing kind of work-based experience and skills to people. I'm curious, not to put you on the spot, Erica, but in your work with the Regional Sector Partnership and BioTech, you've been a real leader in terms of, the last couple of summers, building probably one of the most extensive summer internship programs in the state. Could you share that information with people and kind of, what your thoughts on this are?
Sure. Yeah, thank you for including me here today. So when we got together as a community, as a biotech sector focused in New Haven, we sat around the room with all the industry leaders and said, what are some of our challenges? And as we all know, sitting here, talent was one of them. So we thought, well, how can we start to chip away at that in a way that's meaningful, but is also some low-hanging fruit? So what we came away with was maybe we could combine efforts across all of our companies, and I think it's like 35 companies, to create an umbrella organization where we're coordinating internships across them all. So we're coordinating, making sure that there's pay, reasonableness from company to company, where we're recruiting so that students can kind of just go to one part and not have to go company by company by company. We also put together an HR community where all of HR leads from many of these companies are working collaboratively to source talent and to also educate the students. Like, that's been one thing that's been very, very fun because, Rally Bio can hold a lunch and learn day, and then our Arvinis can hold another day, and so on and so forth. So because of this program, there's been a lot of collaboration across the community. And the first year we stood it up, we had 200 paid internships, which blows Boston and New York out of the water. And this coming year, it's maybe around 125. So it's stepped back a little because of, some market conditions, but still a really robust opportunity. And maybe I'll just take one step further. I think, biotech, by its very nature, there's a lot of, just generally people have to have a lot of education, and, there may not be sort of like a quick and easy from high school to jobs. We think that there's some lab jobs, like BioLaunch is managing for that. But one of the things that we're contemplating as a community right now is, can we do the same thing we did for this internship concept, bringing companies together and really trying to get in, working with the STEM in the high schools and making sure that we as an industry are inspiring the next generation of leaders. It may not be, 0.1 to, engagement to a job. So I know that's, exactly, I know that's what we're trying to do here, but we really see a lot of energy around that from the companies and from sort of the concept of giving back and connecting the community. And I think coming out of doing that kind of work will come with additional creative solutions about how to take these younger people and, make them aware of some of the industry things. So anyway,
yeah,
so
I mean,
lot there, but yeah.
Yeah, but that's super exciting, right? Because, there are several concepts that you just kind of shared, right? One is the idea of don't go it alone. You guys were able to bring together the entire community, 35 companies, and do it jointly, which kind of creates much more effective in terms of sourcing talent, the experience that students have, the kind of PR and marketing to students in terms of New Haven being kind of a place that people should want to come to, or Connecticut, in terms of kind of work. And then I also love what you were just saying on high schools, because that goes with what the commissioner was just saying. If we could develop some career pathway programs, and they don't have to lead to a job immediately, but if there are kind of opportunities for exposure, creating kind of either a course, a work-based learning experience, whatever, so that students are kind of gain exposure and then potentially motivation and interest in the field. That's a really big deal.
Yeah, we're really excited about that. We partnered with the head of the STEM science education in New Haven Public Schools. And so instead of each teacher having to make relationships and each school having to make relationships, we have a point person there and then a point person within this collaborative where there's, again, 35, 40 companies. Like, we think there's efficiencies of scale that can be generated with that. So yeah, thank you for letting me share that.
Yeah, well, it's so exciting. I see, Leah, you raise your hand. You're on mute. Go ahead.
Thank you. Leah Fuhs, Workforce Solutions of Greater Hartford. I had the opportunity to attend the AMAC quarterly meeting where Paul spoke last week. And we were at the New Britain High School, where we got to see the manufacturing, engineering, and technology labs. They're training an incredible crop of kids there in a number of these areas, and they're looking for opportunities to have exposure with businesses. So I can't stress enough the importance of the regional sector partnerships for bringing together businesses and giving them access to these kids. And it's like, reach out to the program managers, because they have kids who are looking to do, they have one kid who was a pilot. He's working with a business now. And it's so important to incentivize your existing experts who are on the way out. There's very much we have to be a speedboat. Business has to continue as usual. There's no bandwidth to kind of invest in these things. But if you're not doing succession planning and pairing up these kids that are coming in with the skills with your sort of outgoing experts, you're really missing an opportunity there. So I think there's room to kind of, all of these things exist already, and there's an opportunity to leverage all of that to achieve what you're talking about.
One question I'd have for you, which is one of the questions that Ray put up earlier, which is, what's the best way for industry to kind of integrate into education as early as possible to provide those kind of opportunities for students?
Yeah, so I think that the Met Lab is it's a model for other high schools. I would love to see other high schools pairing with New Britain to figure out how to create labs to train kids in this way. And again, the regional sector partnership is that central point of contact. So that's where I see the synergy happening. That's where I see the silos breaking down. Every one of these meetings, I'm in the healthcare one as well. Every one of these meetings that I go to, people, I'm hearing, I had no idea that existed. I had no idea that these kids were doing this. I had no idea that these funds were available. I didn't know that Career Connect existed. So just having these conversations and I'm going to repeat the call to action to join a regional sector partnership if you don't belong to one already.
That's really great, Leah. Thank you for saying that. And Alycia, I know you've been involved in kind of helping to support a lot of the efforts in terms of, regional sector partnerships around the state. I don't know. And then obviously your day job is kind of with Advanced CT, working directly with individual companies, and you get a firsthand look at what their needs are, what they're asking for. What thoughts do you have on on really improving the kind of partnerships between industry and education and training organizations?
I'll just echo what Leah was talking about in terms of getting companies involved in these regional sector partnerships. It's really hard for companies to figure out how to engage with the educational partners. They really need help with that. It's hard to navigate the systems. There's, school districts operate so independently at the K-12 level. At the university, it can be hard to identify the right people to work with at the community colleges as well. So I just think it's just so much more efficient and effective to have some convening organizations that can help support that and help the companies navigate. So, and then I think when it's run by an economic development organization, ensuring that they're really connected with the right people in those organizations. So the educators, knowing who to go to, the convening groups to make those connections. But I've really seen, just even in the last couple of years, a real transition through this process of educators really being engaged and responsive to employers' needs. And it's really great.
ReadyCT is doing a really good job of that. They're in the high schools and they're branching out. They're in more high schools all the time. They have a really strong focus on manufacturing. I saw Shannon Merriman on the call earlier. I'm not sure which group she jumped into. But there are organizations that are in the high schools. They have the agreements already with the school boards or with the school leaders. So leveraging those relationships, so you're not starting from square one and doing the rework and, missing, the opportunity of leveraging the work that they've done. And they actually just launched a website that is a wonderful resource. They revealed this at the AMAP meeting as well. So go to the ReadyCT website and check out there's like a career navigation, how can you get involved? How can you find workers? Really, really cool.
Yeah, thank you, Leah, for mentioning that about ReadyCT. They are, Shannon, I think, is in the career pathways discussion. And they are, in working with a large number of school districts in this way of kind of, working with the schools to design career pathways. And they always have an industry partner who is directly engaged in providing kind of internship type experiences for the students that are in that pathway. So it's really something we want to encourage. I saw Vicki's comments, and I think there are a few people here, or a couple people here, maybe from the CSCU. Vicki, I'd love to kind of, you've been involved in this for a long time in terms of really trying to build the bridges and partnerships between community colleges and employers. Could you talk about kind of how you see it, where it is today, and where you think we need to go?
Hi, Mark. Great to talk with you. Yes, actually, I've been working for the Connecticut State College and University System Office for probably about 5-6 years now. So I have the bandwidth from Charter Oak, CSCUs, as well as the Connecticut State. So I can act as a conduit to connect individuals, employers, or agencies to those folks in those particular disciplines that you'd like connections with. My track right now is specifically in healthcare, but I have connections in many of the other areas. So I left my email. Please feel free to reach out. I may not be the person, but I can absolutely, within a day or two, connect you to the folks that you might want to talk to.
So I have something item to just kind of ask the group on. What should our goals be with regard to kind of, industry leadership? And even kind of, leading into that, what data should we track? How do we know if we're being successful here? Senator Hwang?
If I may, being outside of the industry, offer this thought that maybe we change the line of thinking, maybe thinking outside of the box and trying to create pathways, generate new talent. Obviously the tried and true ways are there. We have tremendous experts in that area, but I do believe there's a tremendous that could be cultivated and developed, and we may want to think about different ways. And I think one of the ways that, for me, I'm focusing on, but also learning from others in this, is for me on the apprenticeships, on the skilled trades arena. There is a crisis need down the road. And I think if we think out of the box in regards to DOL and other agencies, that we can cultivate that talent and through the skill sets that we already have, apprenticeship, and learn that. But I think we have to think outside of the box, because competition is relentless, and they're always innovating. And I think we just have to really focus on innovating at all turns to try to create different pathways and attract and retain and build talent. That's just my thought outside of the agency, at least for me, from a policy standpoint. And maybe that advice could be applied to the legislative process too, but that's another conversation. So, but truly, I think we just really need to constantly innovate and look to make changes. If certain initiatives or processes isn't cultivating or attracting the talent that we have, we really have to think differently and compete on a very highly intense level. So that's just my thought on that.
That's great. I also see from Vicki in the chat line, kind of getting more clear about defining the entry level competencies, which I assume will be very helpful to educators, and trainers, to know exactly kind of what companies are looking for in terms of those entry level competencies.
And I'd ask that once you've had someone for 2 or 3 months, tell us where there are gaps, so we can retool the curriculum to make sure we're meeting those expectations with the next hire.
Yeah. Okay.
So Mark, before you move on, I think one of the things that I would love to get to is we can track the number of open jobs by sector and by skill set. And then we track the number of folks that we're creating through these new training programs. It's that interface, like how many of those jobs were fulfilled, via these programs we put into place. And you can, obviously, as a lagging indicator, see how those numbers go up and down. But if there's some way that there's some follow-up polls, even if it's just indicative of, these are working, these aren't, these folks are getting hired, and then we can set goals, like let's get more and more, if we're doing great in biotech, how do we, similarly push that into IT or whatever else it might be.
Yeah. Well, we are going to have, my understanding is we're going to have a pretty, and we're building, and Tracy maybe can talk about this, pretty robust kind of tracking of
good.
all the government programs, such as kind of Career Connect, the Good Jobs Challenge, which Tracy's overseeing. Tracy, you want to say something about kind of what metrics we're going to be looking at there?
Absolutely. So we know that that data tells the story, and that we need to be able to track whether or not, put our money where our mouth is, for lack of a better way to put that. So both the Career Connect and the Good Jobs Challenge will be tracking from job placement, from training participation through completion, and then job placement. Those are our 3 major tracking points. And then, of course, all the demographics around who we are attracting to these programs, who's completing the programs, and who are getting jobs, so that we can alter these throughout the programs. And then when we build programming moving forward, we'll be able to create more distinctive programming based on the data we receive from these programs. So we've got a data analyst on staff, and he has been helping us gather that information. But we know that this is really instrumental in how we're going to move these programs forward and then build them bigger and better, as Vicki had said.
Yeah, I think the other point, Jeff, is you were kind of saying almost a matching process of looking at the results that get generated out of these programs against the openings, or what the, kind of industry needs are, and seeing where they're not matching up, like where do we need maybe different types of programs? Because, maybe Career Connect is limited in terms of kind of it's only a defined length and so on. And it's not going to necessarily meet the needs of, Erica's companies and BioTech, for example, because, you need a different level of, education and training related to that. So
yeah,
I do think that's where the RSPs come in.
Yeah.
So the RSPs they're going to continue to, as they're developing and engaging new partners, that the the programming or the job pathways that they're choosing to develop right now, they're going to continue to evaluate those and say, okay, so now in IT, you might have a job developer position and there might be 100 across the state, but a year from now, that what position they might need will be different. And so the industry will be the ones determining what pipeline and pathways will be created through their RSPs, and then working with education to build those. But the intent is for the RSPs to be very vocal, and then for education to be responsive to that.
Thank you, Tracy. I see Carl has his hand raised.
Yeah, thanks. One of the questions that I have is, I'm one of the founders of this group called Faith Acts for Education, which advocated for changing the funding formula in elementary and high schools and all that kind of stuff. But one of the challenges that we find is that, you got to begin with the end in mind. So the kids that are coming up and through the system, getting to a place where now they're being educated or brought to skill levels that are necessary, have proclivities that are measurable along the way. And so just wondering what type of mechanisms there, when are we starting to really try to understand where the young people are in terms of what their skill sets are and how we can take advantage of their natural giftings and talents so that we can direct them towards these pathways. I think that's really critical because, if we look at the group that's unemployed right now, there are a lot of generalists out there that are unemployed. There's some great specific talented kids that are coming through programs, but it's a long-term game. COVID took 3 years to get through. The next 15 years are going to be filled with this type of challenge as we try to make this shift. And so we're very much interested in trying to understand how we measure and understand and help facilitate the best of each one of the young people being able to find what they can do and where they can do it, what industry and what genre they work in. So just wondering where we are with that, how we can get more of that information and more of that activity into our process earlier on.
Wow, what really wonderful questions, Carl. And I mean, I think that really goes to the kind of challenge on the, kind of K-12 system side that we need to start earlier. We really need to kind of be able to, with regard to pathways, kids need to kind of get exposed to that a lot earlier so that, and have access to counselors who can, in fact, kind of, really connect kids starting at much earlier ages, middle school, let's say, with regard to kind of career pathways. And then we have to work backwards in terms of understanding, are this kind of fundamental skills being addressed, skill gaps, math, reading, science, whatever that may be, are we preparing kids so that they in fact can take advantage of later on these kinds of opportunities in terms of pathways? The other point I heard you say related to kind of, even when we're talking, at the college level, or certainly the high school level in terms of navigation, our students being kind of directed to being, in the areas that are kind of where they can have the greatest success. I look at the kind of CT state right now, and this is kind of, I know something that they're very interested in addressing, but today, the predominant kind of focus for students is what you said, Carl, generalists, general education. And the idea for those students is, well, they'll be able to transfer to a four-year college because they're not necessarily going to, with an associate's degree, be able to, in a general kind of curriculum, that won't qualify them for any of the kind of, jobs we're talking about here. So I think, we have to make a real all-out effort to be really transparent on what the different career pathways coming out of the educational systems are, and be able to work with students and, reach them where they are and really provide them good information and help them find the right careers that match their interests with kind of, the real opportunities out there. So.
Yeah, I think it's even so much more than money. I mean, again,
Yes.
got $150 million into the budget. Great, we're glad for that. But the challenge is really that the educational system really does try to, and what's Briggs Myers or whatever it is that everyone loves to talk about from way back. Maybe I'm too old. It's the whole thing. But the idea of that form of testing and understanding of those natural gifts and talents and abilities and those learned habits that are coming up. You said it well, middle school and up is really where I hope we could push some activity in that direction so we can stop some of the tragedy instead of just fixing it. Thanks.
Totally agree. And I would love having Faith Acts, involved in that from an advocacy standpoint too, because I think kind of, school districts need to hear that they need to start a lot earlier, on these kind of courses. So,
well, help us next time you see us out there. Stop.
Yeah. I hear about this regularly though, Carl, because my board chair is your executive director.
Oh, Jamil?
Jamil is my board chair at Social Venture Partners. So
okay. Good. Tell her I said hi.
Well, anyway, this is a great discussion.